My friend and I always used to walk through a wonderful spacious park when we were younger. It was full of tall trees and it was very nicely maintained. In this large park there was an abandoned mansion. I can't really say how long it had been there, but on that day the front door of the mansion was wide open. The two of us decided to check out what was inside the place. As we inched through the door, the very first thing we noticed was that the mansion's floor was littered with crumpled up pieces of paper. We looked at each other and observed that there was no furniture, nothing except for those wrinkled balls of paper. The mansion had 6 rooms on its main floor, and every room we entered bore more and more scrunched up pieces of paper. We decided to open up one of the paper balls to see what was inside. Our curiosity got the better of us. I picked up a single wrinkled piece, and as my friend picked up another, I unfolded my paper, smoothing out its bends and dents. At that moment, it was almost as if a piece of a rainbow emerged before our eyes, and I was suddenly standing next to a large window in one of the upstairs rooms of the house. I was looking outside into the large park when I looked down at the piece of paper I held. It read, "Look outside the large window that oversees the park in the upstairs parlour." I dropped the piece of paper and it fluttered gracefully to the ground. Meanwhile, I stared at my open hands in a bout of horror. Dazed and utterly perplexed, I found my way downstairs and met up with my friend. He was in the kitchen, sitting at a round table that hadn't been there before. Where did that come from? I wondered. My friend stared at his opened paper and reread the words several times before he looked at me and turned the page my way. It said, "Go to the kitchen and sit at the round table." We stared at each other for a few moments, vaguely afraid, but then we began to chuckle. Within seconds, we were laughing our heads off, marvelling at our newfound game. We could hardly believe what had happened, but being young as we were, the mystery was endlessly exciting. We decided again to open up another scrunched piece of paper. As we opened up the crumpled papers on the floor, we experienced the same sudden flash of rainbow colours. But this time I ended lying down in the field behind the mansion. When I peered onto the paper in my right hand, it read, "Lie down in the field behind the mansion." I giggled uncontrollably. After a few minutes of running around the house, I found my friend collecting multiple balls of paper in his arms, eager to experience more of these strange, exciting phenomena. We both got the gist of what was happening at this point. We had no idea as to how it was possible, but we decided to have more fun with it. The supernatural always had a way of captivating our hearts. After a few more run-throughs with these strange mini teleportation devices, I began to feel apprehensive. I wondered if at one point I would be placed somewhere I didn't want to be, or I'd be made to do something that I didn't enjoy. We continued though. Minute after minute we unfolded many papers and travelled through bedrooms, closets, trees. But then, after having been on the roof of the mansion, I stood before my friend, dead on the living room floor. I didn't scream. I couldn't murder him. I read on my crumpled page as I felt a surge of vomit and bile rising into my throat. Nothing came out, but the sickness in my throat spread to my stomach, my head, and my heart. I didn't know what to do at this point. I began to scream and shout, praying to God for this to be a nightmare. I wanted it to go away. I wanted to rewind our day and be outside again, together walking underneath the trees. I willed myself to be calm, and I hesitantly unfolded another paper in the hopes that the problem would correct itself. Once again, I saw the colours of the rainbow, and I found myself standing behind a tree several meters away from the house. I could clearly see the front door within a few instants. I saw both myself and my friend walk through that door. I began to wonder if I had died or if I was having an out-of-body experience. I looked at the sheet in my hand, and the only words scrawled upon it were, "Time will repeat itself, and a paradox will take place, and it will be allowed." That gave me an idea. In my pocket remained the paper that made me kill my friend. Without looking at it, I crumpled it back up. Quietly, I followed my other self, who had separated from my friend, as he explored the rooms of the house. As I crept behind him, he turned around very suddenly. Before he could utter a syllable, I forced the paper in front of my eyes, and in a flash of rainbow colours, I was able to kill my other self. The laws of time allowed me to take over my dead self's place in this world, and also because of the fact that it was allowed to happen. As it was written on the second piece of paper that I had on me, which reversed time, it must have control over time and paradoxes, which made me now the new alive and present of my other dead self. I hid my limp, bleeding other dead self in a cupboard in the upstairs bathroom to rot. To my great relief, I heard my friend call my name from downstairs. My friend who managed to stay alive, and well, my best friend. When I went downstairs, he greeted me excitedly, smiling childishly, and being blissfully unaware of the situation. I pretended that nothing had happened. In a heartbeat, I told him that the house creeped me out and that it would be much better if we left. After that day, we never went near the mansion again. I don't know if anyone saw or heard about anything that happened between us, but I recently heard from another friend that the house had been demolished. I dreaded the probable prospect that my corpse was uncovered in the bathroom cabinet. I work for a small newspaper company, and I usually just write about things happening in the community. One story though got me particularly interested, and it was about a woman who lived in filth. Her neighbours had been complaining about odd foul smells coming from her house. It isn't the type of story that I usually do, but it was different, and that's what got me interested. When I got to her house, I could clearly see from the front of the house how filthy it all was. The thought of going inside started to become a regrettable decision. I mean, first encounters count, right? And I didn't mean to be so judgmental straight away, but looking at her house, it gave off the sort of impression that this was a person who didn't look after herself that much. I also talked with some of the locals, and what they told me about her didn't give off a good judgment of character. This woman was clearly out of touch with everything around her. At the same time, I wanted to know more about her, and me, being a nosy person, I couldn't help but wanting to know more about her. Clearly, something had happened in her life to make her live like this. I had already called her to make sure she was okay with me looking into her life, and she agreed to show me her way of life and to explain to me why she lives the way she does. The filth had a stench, and I was surprised that she hadn't died from any bacteria, because it seemed like the right environment for bacteria and viruses to survive. Her mental state was questionable, and she had old cassette players and VHS players all over the place, which don't really exist anymore. When I asked her why she lived like this, all that she could tell me was that as long as filth smelled like the way it should, it was all good. Everything was a mess, and I don't know why, but it kind of all got me being grateful for all the things I had in my life. On the other hand, I am sure someone with OCD would love to clean every speck of this place, and with everything out of order, it told me that her life must have been out of control. Things were broken, and she survived on government benefits and some inheritance from her parents. I could hear small things moving around, and they must have been rats or some other animal. It's weird how animals can survive in such mess. I guess their immune system must be better than ours. Actually, maybe this woman's immune system might be amazing at this point because she has survived this long in this mess. She told me about her mother and father. She was brought up in a 5-bedroom house. She also had 2 younger siblings, and after she had told me that she had siblings, I quickly assumed that her siblings had wanted nothing to do with her, which I was gravely wrong about. I tried asking more questions about her upbringing, but all she told me was, just go to the house of my childhood and notice how the filth gives off an amazing aroma. I then went to her childhood home, and I could clearly see that it had been abandoned for many years, and Mother Nature had clearly took over the house. It's sad how houses begin to go under after they had been abandoned, and it reminded me of the only thing I had remembered in my sociology class before I changed courses to journalism. It's people that give meaning to buildings and materialistic things, not the object itself. I kicked the door down as I could clearly see that the front door was past its prime. From what the house looked like, I had expected odour and stench to hit my nose, but instead I got to smell the most amazing aroma I had ever smelt in my life. I then started searching her childhood home for anything interesting to find. This woman's childhood home was exactly like her own house, and I don't know why, but I started to become irritated by this woman. In my generation, we are finding it difficult to even buy a home, and even if someone from my generation has managed to somehow buy a home, it's hard to keep it maintained. Yet this woman has managed to live in a big childhood home as well as having her own home, which clearly she had decided to neglect it. It's unfair, but I guess life is just unfair. It was all a mess, and I was beginning to find it all predictable with the neglect of having any care or pride in one's own life. Maybe her parents were abusive, and I wondered more about her siblings, because now I wanted to know why she was so alone in the world. We all need someone, no matter who we are, but then again, loneliness is a big problem in Western civilization, and we even have someone in the government whose main job is to tackle things like loneliness. Loneliness becomes more apparent as we get older, and this woman was old now, and with the inventions of social media and computer games, it's made loneliness even more stronger. The only good but odd thing about this woman's childhood home is the nice aroma and smell. I decided to follow the aroma because I couldn't resist it anymore. The aroma could be smelt the most from behind the sofas. And you know how in cartoons, when one cartoon character follows a pack of sweets, all lined up because it was being set up? That's what happened to me. When I looked behind the sofas, I gasped with horror and with utter disbelief, because I never thought that I would ever look upon something so disgusting and completely random. I saw 4 skeleton bones, still giving off a perfume-like scent. And this is not the type of smell you would think death could give off. I mean, with an amazing smell present, you would think something was full of life to give such a scent. I went back to see the woman, and I didn't call the police just yet because I wanted to know more, and I wanted her permission first of how to proceed with everything that I had just found. When I told this woman of filth, of what I had experienced in her childhood home, she started tearing up. Instead of calling the police, she just turned on the VHS player, and I started to watch something. Like an explanation video. At the same time, I also have to shamefully admit, finding all of this would have progressed my career in the journalism world. Even though I had just found something terrible, my career coming to my mind showed how I could have profited from this. Anyhow, the video told me more things about what was really going on. Hello, my name is Dr. Rogerson Peake. I have invented a pill that could make any dead person smell nice. When a body starts decomposing, it usually starts to smell. But with this pill, a decomposing body will be the most sweet-smelling thing you have ever smelt. The cassette player kept on playing. After watching the whole video, a few thoughts came to mind. Yes, the pill would give the dead person a bit more dignity by smelling nice. And it will also help people who deal with dead bodies, like in hospitals. But at the same time, this might be a great advantage for a murderer or serial killer. Imagine someone had murdered someone in your home, but the murdered person had this pill before being murdered. It could be some time before you notice something is off. Something smelling nice usually doesn't give an image of death or tell you that something is decomposing. It's always the nasty smell which makes us think something is off. Like when I was in this woman's childhood home, I honestly didn't think I would find something to be dead. Do you see how this might be an advantage for a serial killer or murderer? And I started to understand why this woman lived like the way she lived now for such a long time. I felt bad for being so judgmental or for thinking about my career gain of this whole story. I also started to glue together who those skeletons belonged to. From common sense, those skeletons behind the sofa in her childhood home must have been her 2 parents and 2 siblings. and I thought they had just abandoned her because of the way she had lived her life. "Is someone trying to kill you?" I asked this woman. My whole family took part in the experiment to eat the pill. We were struggling for money at the time, and they promised us that they would pay us lots of money to eat the pill. They weren't 100% honest with us, and none of us knew what the pill was made for exactly, she told me. She started crying a little bit, and the more I understood her story and why she lived the way she did, it was sad, just so sad. How we humans can be so unsympathetic or not care enough to understand someone but rather to judge and cast aside. After taking the pill, one midnight someone broke into my home, and I was just a child back then, and this man had murdered my mother, father, and both my siblings. I hid in a secret wall cupboard in my room, which my father had built. For weeks this strange man who broke into my house observed my whole family's dead bodies. They all started to smell nice as they decomposed. I overheard his talk on the phone, and they wanted to use this pill in war and other scenarios where death is common, but they wanted to hide the deaths and murders. If something smells nice, no one would ever think something has died, she explained to me. She managed to escape when the strange man went for a smoke in her garden, and I couldn't believe what I had just been told. This story was not just a story, but probably one of the biggest scandals in the 21st century. I had to write about this and get this story out, and I phoned the police about the 4 skeletons in this woman's childhood home. Something had to be done, and we all know how shady the government can be and some of the things they can be capable of. This woman deserved justice. I hugged her and she pleaded me not to go to the police, but obviously I decided to go against her. I went back to my flat, and as soon as I entered, a beautiful scented aroma hit my nose. But I never sprayed anything inside my flat recently. I checked my whole flat and I found a dead body in my bathtub. The dead body had a note attached to it, which read, "Be wary of your steps, lad." I straight away drove to the woman's house, and this time, instead of the scent of filth hitting my nose, it was a perfume-like aroma, and I knew she had been murdered in her own living room. There was a note on her body which read, "We are watching, and the dead body in your flat has been taken now." And I couldn't believe it. I checked her childhood home, and everything inside had been taken, and no sign of police of any kind. They knew I would check on this woman after finding a dead body in her apartment, as well as her childhood home. I am being watched now. You know, getting a full 1 hour break at work should be easily given to all workers, but managers and owners seem to find ways around it. In every workplace I have been employed at, all my breaks have been disturbed, or even worse, I didn't get to have a full 1 hour break. Especially in times of economic downturn, it's always that guy at the bottom who gets the worst deal out of it all. We all must work more longer and have less breaks to create more profits for the owners. Only by the luck of the gods, which only happen ever so occasionally, will you get to have an undisturbed 1 hour break. A couple of months ago, I started applying for new jobs and got a new job straight away, which promised to give workers fair treatment. By fair treatment, they meant getting a full 1 hour break and giving you all the annual holidays that workers deserved, which was set up by the unions. When I spoke to the managers during my interview, they seemed nice and down to earth. All my past managers seemed bitter and grumpy, but these lot seemed to have a different outlook on things. The job role title was called a concierge for a residential building. The residential building was a brand spanking new one, and a lot of new building were being built to tackle the housing crisis. Anyhow, I fitted right into the job, and on my first day everything was going smoothly. On my first day, my manager told me that I don't decide when to go on my break, but my break times come to me. I honestly didn't know what my manager meant by this, but I was kind of busy to know more at the time. When I got inside the elevator to go up to the 9th floor, I couldn't believe it when the elevator had stopped working and was stuck on the 4th floor due to some mechanical issue. The company that built the elevators inside the residential building contacted me through the elevator. I was stuck inside and told me that a mechanic was on his way in an hour. Then my manager phoned me and he told me that he knew that the lift had broken down and knew that it would take the mechanic an hour to get here. My manager also told me that being stuck inside the elevator for an hour was my real break. Like my manager had told me before, that I don't get to decide when to have my break, but break times choose when to come to me, like being stuck inside an elevator. After the mechanic finally came and fixed the elevator, after an hour, I had a word with my manager. He thought nothing of it and didn't really care for what I had to say because I managed to have a full 1 hour uninterrupted break inside a broken lift. Then another time, I became stuck inside the stairs and the doors on the stairs aren't locked by a key but a fob system, so tenants need a fob card to get in and out of the stairs, just like how they need to get into the building. Basically, the fob card system had gone weird and all the doors which were connected to the system were all on lockdown. I had decided to use the stairs because I was scared of using an elevator after it had broken down, but now I was stuck inside the stairs and my fob card wouldn't work and let me out into the corridors of the building. My manager phoned me and told me that he knew the fob card system was down for an hour, and that hour being stuck inside the stairs was my official break. At that moment, I told myself that I was going to find another job because this was just crazy. I had never worked in a place where break times chose where and when a person gets to have a break. There was one time where I thought I wasn't going to get a break because nothing was breaking down or becoming faulty and trapping me inside a certain place in the building for an hour. For the first time in my life, I was happy and glad not to be getting a break. But when my shift was over and I got into my car, the car gate was down and wouldn't open for an hour. I was stuck inside the car park, which belonged to the building, and workers weren't allowed to park inside the car park, and my manager phoned me. He told me off for parking inside the car park, which only tenants could park in, and told me that it would take an hour for the mechanic to come and fix the car gate. That hour would be my break, even though my shift had finished and there was nothing else I could do but just wait it out. I couldn't find any new jobs because jobs were really drying up in my area. Now I had put in a month's holiday, which I needed, and it had been accepted. I decided that the whole of September would be my holiday, but on the last day of August, as I got into an elevator because I needed to get to the top floor, because something had happened on the 9th floor, the elevators stopped working again on the 5th floor, and I was trapped once again. An automatic call out from the computer inside the elevator made to the company that built the elevators inside the building, but they had bad news, and they told me that they wouldn't have any available mechanic for a whole month. Then my manager phoned me and told me that the month spent inside the elevator was to be my holiday, because not only do your breaks choose where and when you get to have a break, but even your holidays choose where and when you spend your holiday. I am still stuck inside the elevator, and I am counting the days when this month will end. Also, a hatchet opens every 5 hours, and food is given to me, and I have no idea how that works. After I get out of here, probably smelling of body odor, I am not working here anymore. Friday night 2016. I was 8 at the time, when my brother, who was 10, and I were home alone. We stayed in our bedroom to play on our PS2. My brother went downstairs to make some meals for us to eat, while I was waiting. I needed to go to the bathroom so badly, so I went. Once I came back to play on my PS2, I saw my brother looking confused. I asked him, "What's wrong?" He replied, "Did you open the window?" I thought he was joking, so I laughed and said, "No, are you trying to scare me?" Then he didn't answer. I didn't mind, he sometimes ignores me. I went back to play on my PS2 when I heard a loud banging on the window. I couldn't see who it was, since it was dark outside. I went outside with my brother and a flashlight when we saw who it was. It was a big, tall white man with really blonde hair and a black hoodie. I quickly ran into the house, went to my kitchen to grab a knife, and ran with my brother to the bathroom. While I was in the bathroom, I realized I left the door open. I cried in fear with my brother. We called 911. Then, when the cops arrived, they found the man dead. Days passed, and I wondered if he wanted us to see him kill himself, or worse. We are all chasing for more freedom, and I mean every living being, big or small, is constantly looking to escape. Humanity has come a long way with the amount of freedom and rights that people have. A couple of years ago, slavery was the norm, and people were divided by the colour of their skin. Gender equality has come a long way as well, because it wasn't so long ago that women were restricted to being only mothers. So many famous male and female activists have fought for freedom for all human beings and are now being looked up to as heroes. Anything can be a prison though, and it could be a job you hate or being stuck in a relationship that is going nowhere. The need to be free from those types of prisons are just as strong as any other yearning for escape. Something always comes to trap us, and the fight to escape entrapments, however big or small, is the curse for being alive. People addicted to drugs used drugs to help them escape from one hellish lifestyle, only to be reliant on their drug to the point that it becomes their new prison. They traded in one prison for another. The way addicts escape addiction is through rehab and the use of other medicines as their ticket to freedom. The need to get out of things is in all of us, but with so many rights protecting us and the freedom to love, travel and choose whatever takes our fancy, I must ask the question as to why people are so miserable, considering everything that we have and the privileges our era has given us. Unlike in past eras, we sappy group of people living in the best of times, depression is prevalent throughout the globe, and suicide is common, even though anyone from the past would think we are living in the golden age of human civilization. I always used to think that maybe we are all ungrateful, but then opinions always change. Like the seasons throughout the year, my daughter was looking for freedom, and she has always been depressed. Ever since she was a little tiny girl, she hated hanging around with other kids and was a very reserved child. The other girls naturally took to picking on her because my daughter was so different, and it was obvious that the kids her age would not take to her so easily. I have had to change her school multiple times now. Now I have found a school where she can be herself. It's strange how children bully each other, as if they do not realise that what they say and do to each other has real effects on the other human. I guess maturing takes time. I tried to show my daughter the different types of hobbies she could get into, but she just doesn't seem to like anything, and everything just depresses her. I have spent quite a bit of money trying to get the best psychologist to deal with my daughter, but in the end, medication is all that we are given. I dreamt that one day my daughter would play with other girls and enjoy all of the things that life has given us. Then one day I awoke to my daughter laughing and chatting to someone outside our house, and as I looked outside, I couldn't believe that my daughter was socializing with someone. It was a woman I had never seen before, but my daughter seemed to connect with her somehow, and I was just so happy for her. When I tried to introduce myself to the woman talking with my daughter, she just simply walked away. My daughter had a smile on her face, like she felt relieved, and I asked her about the woman she was talking to, but my daughter just smiled and said, "Just a generous woman." Just like that, I started seeing my daughter hanging about with this woman. I didn't try and intervene because for the first time my daughter looked so comfortable in her own skin. At the same time, an adult woman hanging around my daughter of high school age did always concern me. My daughter was smiling though, and I guess I had intentions of inviting this woman over to my house to try to get to know her. I mean, I have tried many specialists to get through to my daughter, and I wanted to know how she did it. My wife was a little jealous and felt like she was a failure because she couldn't connect with her daughter. When my daughter went to school, she didn't want a lift. I received a knock on the door. There were two smartly dressed guys who were from the British Secret Services, and they had something serious to tell me. They showed pictures of the woman who my daughter had taken a liking to, and told me that this woman had died in World War II. They showed us her documents and everything about her life and where she was buried, and the obvious questions were asked, but the answers were not simple to understand. It's not the dead or anything supernatural, the first guy told me. Do you believe in aliens? The other one asked. Aliens? I replied. We are not so sure how they came to our planet, but these aliens travel and feed off freedom. Our race is freer than ever before, and so these aliens can travel and feed so more than they could before, the first guy told me. They use dead people as well to move around, as dead people are considered by them to be free, the second guy told me. I couldn't believe any of this, and I told them to go away, even when they showed me proof that they did truly work in the National Secret Service. I couldn't take any more of it. They gave me their card, and I was told to call them if anything started to escalate. As soon as my daughter came home, I banned her from ever seeing that strange woman ever again. My daughter started to cry and moan that it wasn't fair and that she really liked the woman. When I followed her into her bedroom crying and wailing, we were both in shock when that strange woman was suddenly in her room. My daughter screamed in terror, and I was just trying to catch my breath out of sheer shock that the woman who my daughter knew now looked like a hideous creature. The woman held out her arm towards my daughter, and even though she was talking softly, it echoed throughout the house. Do you want to be free from all of this, Julia? Come with us, and we will give you the ultimate freedom, the woman told my daughter. I then noticed that my daughter seemed to be in some kind of trance. Her smile was weak, and I grabbed hold of her to stop her from moving into the creature's arms. All my daughter could say was, I want to be free from all of this and everything else. Then, by some miracle, the two guys from the Secret Services had been keeping an eye on our family, and they rushed into my house. As they entered the room, all three of us dragged my daughter from her bedroom. I locked my daughter's bedroom with the thing still trapped inside. As I did this, my daughter was in the living room. She was back to being shocked and scared. I finally believed the two Secret Service guys, and they explained more to me about the odd aliens from outer space. They said to me, these aliens don't just travel and feed off freedom, but they are made of it. This also answered my question as to why depression and suicide is so prevalent in the golden era of having such high levels of freedom and rights. Depression is just one of the effects caused by the aliens who chase after freedom and make us kill ourselves, because they cause so much emotional and psychological pain that their victim only wants to be free from it all. I wanted to take my daughter to the hospital, but the two Secret Service guys told me that the hospital wouldn't help. They warned me that there is only one thing that I could do. They told me that because the aliens feed off freedom and can't travel through freedom, I had to start reducing my daughter's freedoms. They explained that even some of her rights as a human being would have to be limited. That way, it would be hard for the aliens to get to her. The two Secret Service guys spoke to their manager. As they explained this to me, they started to shuffle some paperwork and explain to me that my daughter had to start doing hard labour for no money. She would be prevented from going out or eating something when she felt like it. I went along with it because all I wanted was for my daughter to be safe. My wife was utterly distraught about the whole thing, and she couldn't stop thinking about my daughter's future. She was concerned about what my daughter could do if her rights and freedoms are limited. We were told that some people do survive, but some don't. We were warned that the aliens are always trying to find ways to get to their victim. I had to take my daughter out of school and make her sleep down in the cellar and lock the cellar door. All of this made it look like our daughter was a slave. However, it did work, as the woman in her bedroom had disappeared. I would sometimes see the woman either in the market or some other place outside the home. Either way, she was far away from my family. At a later date, I had to force my daughter to go to work in a meat factory, where the owner was working for the Secret Services. The department in charge of the meat factory is a special secret government service department which deals with aliens and other creatures alike. The department have made all sorts of factories as a way of rehabilitation for people like my daughter whose freedom and rights had to be taken away due to the aliens. It was horrible, and listening to her cry, it also wasn't nice to smell her after a hard day's work. My daughter begged me to give her life back, but I couldn't, as I knew what would happen to her if I did. All of my daughter's basic rights and freedom now taken away, but she was safe for a while, which only lasted for a couple of months. One day I heard my daughter screaming down in the cellar. As I rushed down, I saw that my daughter was in front of that woman again, and she was trying to tempt my daughter into taking freedom. I saw my daughter going back into a trance again, and her smile was so weak and feeble I felt like she was drugged or something. I ran down the stairs and dragged my daughter away from the alien. As I did, it gave out a screech, and a couple of more Secret Service guys came to our rescue. Our house was being watched 24/7 at that point, and I locked the cellar door. After the door was locked, I looked in confusion at the two men who ordered me to take away my daughter's freedom and rights. I was confused because their plan hadn't worked as they'd promised. Then one of them looked at me with a serious, worried look and said, "We have to go deeper and take more rights from your daughter. This time, we will take her ability to choose who she can have sex with." I practically puked when I heard that, and I shouted, "You want to take away the freedom of choice of who my daughter gets to have sex with? She is still at school." "We may not have a choice here, and the alien still managed to get to your daughter because she still had some freedom left, which was sexual freedom. I didn't think we would have to go that far, but this creature is determined to get to your daughter," the second Secret Service man told me. Although it sounded disgusting, they had a point. However, I wasn't going to let my daughter become some sex slave, and nor was my wife prepared to see our daughter become a sex slave. Both my wife and I decided to give our daughter away to the creature down in the cellar. As I held my daughter in my arms with my wife behind me crying her eyes out, I looked at the alien, and it looked at my daughter. My daughter smiled again. I loved seeing her smile like that. I realized then that I couldn't bear seeing her as some slave anymore. My daughter said to the alien, "I want freedom. I want to escape." And the alien touched my daughter, and she died in my arms. The alien looked at me and said, "Your daughter is now free from everything that has caused her so much agony." The next couple of years were hard. The relationship between my wife and me was not the same anymore, as we would both constantly argue and blame each other. It was not until recently we both saw our daughter again. We would see her in random places, which brought hope to us both. And one day she appeared in our house, and my wife and I were overjoyed. Our daughter was now offering me and my wife freedom. She is offering us freedom from the pain that life can give to parents whose child has died. Both of us know what we want. My wife was the willing participant, and now I have to try and to protect her from the same fate my daughter had experienced. An ordinary day with my friends hanging out, riding bikes around the block and far away from home. Something caught our attention. An abandoned house. Completely abandoned and damaged. What caught my attention was the really bad smell that the house has. I planned with my friends to visit the house at midnight to finally find out what's the bad smell. It was finally midnight. I had already packed my supplies needed for this mission. I had a notebook so I can write notes based on what we see. When we arrived to the house had the door open. I thought it was weird considering the fact that it was shut when we were riding the bikes around the house. Once we entered, the smell got worse. It came from the kitchen. I had a pocket knife for self-protection. We went to the kitchen and our eyes opened wide when we realized there was a cannibalistic restaurant. I hid in the closet with my friends. I started to write notes about it. Once the people in that restaurant were gone, we took off. We called the police once we got home. They arrived a little bit late, yet they found a dead body outside our house, with a note that said, and a picture of us taking off. We moved to a new home. Our home went through a home invasion many times. So much we had to move. As I was packing my stuff, I called my friends to see if they can help me with the moving. They agreed. We carried boxes and boxes to the truck. It was already night. Exhausted, we agreed for a sleepover. As it was 5:08 a.m, I was awake, but I wasn't tired at all. The next day we went to the basement to carry more boxes and old stuff. What caught my attention was an old flip phone. I picked it up and went to my room with my friends to check it out. The flip phone belongs to a crackhead who lived in our basement. I went to investigate as soon as I read the messages. Then I heard a voice saying, "You found me. Congrats." I ran so fast, I told my parents and we called the police. Later, the man was found. His intentions were to murder my family. Me and my two friends stepped inside a haunted house, and the one thing I knew about this house was apparently there were some strict rules you needed to follow once inside. I had no idea what the rules were, but the house was just an ordinary house built in the 1900s. My two friends were Samuel and Connor, and we were all fans of haunted houses. The three of us smashed the front door and we were able to enter the abandoned haunted house. To be honest, the whole area was kind of abandoned. As soon as we stepped inside the house, we still didn't know what the rules were. Inside the abandoned house, it is exactly as you would expect an abandoned house to be. Distant from present times, even the atmosphere didn't want us inside. And then Connor shouted out to us because he had figured out what the rules were. You would think the rules were written on the walls or on some piece of paper, but when Connor showed us his arms, it had writing on it. When me and Samuel checked ourselves out, we too had writing on our body, which we didn't write, and it was the rules of the house. Connor on both his arms had the rule no talking written on his arms, and he couldn't talk anymore. Samuel on his feet had the rules no violence written on one of his feet, and I had something written on my neck which read no leaving for the three of you. And I guess we each had our own rule to follow. Connor couldn't speak anymore. Samuel couldn't do anything violent anymore, and when he tried to smash a window, he just couldn't. I tried leaving, but there was a new door which had replaced the old one we had broken to get into the house. Also, my rule written on my neck also affected the other two, while theirs didn't affect mine. Connor started to panic because he couldn't talk anymore, or whenever Connor tried shouting, but nothing would come out. Then Samuel had an idea. Because the rules were somehow written on our body, the only way to break them is by breaking the limb it's written on. Then I did something without asking Connor's permission and broke both his arms, and Connor managed to scream. He was angry and glad at the same time that I broke his arm and disproved Samuel's theory to be correct. Connor then broke Samuel's feet, the one where the rule was written on, and Samuel was able to act violent again. They were both in pain, but relieved, but none of us could get out of this house. You see, my rule, which was written on my neck, affected all three of us, and I know that there is only one way to break the rule. Samuel and Connor can break windows all they want and act violent, but a replacement would just appear, as none of us could leave the house. The only way to break the rule is by snapping my neck. I declined all offers of snapping my neck, and there is no easy way to break someone's neck, as the fatality of death is too high. After many days inside this house, I am considering letting Samuel break my neck. Luckily, we brought ibuprofen to ease the pain which Samuel and Connor are experiencing, and some food as well. We are running out of food and pain medication, and the only way out is by snapping my neck to break the rule of not being able to leave this house. I have tried breaking my neck, but the rule seems to be a strong one.
My parents weren't happy with where we were living. We wanted a new start, so we moved to a new town called Maple Heights. It was a nice town. Most people were friendly. I moved here when I was 10. I met this same kid who lived on the same street as me. He seemed to be the same age as me, but I never saw him go to his house. We became best friends. We always hanged out and played at my house. One day, I asked him if we can go to his house today. He told me that's not a good idea because his grandma was sick. I asked about his parents and he started crying, so I never asked him about them again. It always crossed my mind of what happened to them and where they are to this day. But I didn't want to see him cry again, so I left it alone. It's now 8 years later, and we have just graduated high school. I've never been the one to drink or throw parties, but my parents were out of town this week, and my friend kept begging me. So I told him I'll throw a small get-together. I said it would just be me, him, and some of our close friends. He smiled and agreed. It came to that time when the party would come. I was only expecting a couple of people, but instead, a bunch of people came. I was getting pretty nervous because my parents were coming home the next day and everyone was drinking. Stuff was getting knocked down and the house was a mess. I got mad at my friend for inviting all of these people. And my friend told me that he wanted me to make more friends before he had to go. I was the kid who always did my schoolwork and never had any fun. So tonight, I told him I would let loose if he helped me clean up before my parents got home. He agreed. I felt pressured to drink, so I tried it and then I started partying and drinking some more. Before I noticed, I was waking up and everyone was gone. I quickly looked at the time and realized that my parents were about to be home within 10 minutes. I started to panic because I still had the whole house to clean up. But when I checked the house, it was completely clean. I was so confused. I then found a letter from my friend telling me that he cleaned everything up and apologized that he had to go and that he would never see me again. I was very confused, so I tried calling him, but then I realized that he never had a phone. I then went to go visit the house my friend told me where he lived, but I was never allowed to go. I went over to the house, and it was a creepy looking house. I rang the doorbell, and no one answered. I saw that the door was open, so I went inside. The house was abandoned as if nobody has ever lived there. I heard some weird noises, so I ran out of the house. I came back home and decided to look up my friend on the internet and on all social medias. I came across an article of my friend and of his grandma. The article said missing 10-year-old boy who was never found. The article was from 8 years ago and was just recently updated. It said that the boy was never found. I said to myself, this is really weird. Then I looked at the date and it said 1847. I couldn't believe what I have just read. I asked my parents about that house and they said that a family of a 10-year-old boy, his grandma, and parents all were killed in the house. I asked my parents how. They said the boy killed his whole family, then went missing for 8 years. I worked some extra hours and was finally on my way home. It was late. The bus came and I took it home. Usually there's no one on the bus but me and the driver, but this time there was another man on the bus. He looked very creepy and scary. His face did not look so happy. As I was waiting on the bus, my stop came, so I got off the bus. Weirdly enough, the man also got off where I did. I didn't think too much about it because maybe that was his stop too, and maybe he also worked late or was on his way home from being with family. As I was walking home, I noticed a man behind me. He wasn't right behind me, he was keeping his distance, but was still following me. The other weird thing was that there was no one else on the road besides us. As I continued my walk home, I noticed that the man kept getting closer and closer to me very slowly. I felt something wasn't right, so I decided to run. I ran as fast as I can. Then I looked back, and at first, I don't see the man. Then, one of the lights on the road lit up, and there he was, under the light. He then starts to come at me. He's not running, but he's tiptoe dancing towards my direction. It was so creepy, and I was so scared, so I ran straight home and didn't even think to look back. When I got to my door, I looked around me and saw no one. Good, I said. I think I lost him. I enter my house and go straight to bed. But before I do, I look out my window. And sure enough, there he is under the streetlight. With that creepy grin smile looking straight at me, I immediately closed my curtains, then opened them back up again. And surely enough, he was gone.
The police station received a distressful call from a man who claimed that he lived with a murderer. He had to look at the murderer's face every single day. I was asked to go to his flat and talk with him. I have to admit though, he sounded off. When I went up to his flat, he was completely alone, and I wanted to ask questions about his flatmate, who he has accused of being a murderer. Where is the murderer? I asked him. The man went up to a mirror and pointed at his own reflection. There he is, he proudly proclaimed.
I was over my friend's house, who I haven't seen in a while. We were bored, so I asked if he wanted to play hide and seek. He said sure. I told him that he can go hide first. He said okay, and I started counting. 3, 2, 1, ready or not, here I come, I said. I started to walk around the house. It was an old and creepy looking house. As I'm walking around the house looking for him, I notice a big picture frame that is crooked, so I go over to it to fix it. But then, it falls right over. But there was a secret entrance where the picture frame was that fell. My eyes were wide open, and I think, wow, this is amazing. He must be hiding in there. I enter in, and I just see a bed. It's a mess though, and it smells. But my friend isn't down here, so I went back to where the picture frame was, and I left. So I could continue to look for my friend. I walk further down the hallway, and I find my friend. I see you, I said. He says, oh man, how did you find me? I told him that I just saw him. As we're walking back, I told him that his secret room was pretty cool. He stops and looks at me very weirdly and says, "What weird room?" He seems to be so serious, so I laugh and tell him, "Your secret room behind the picture frame, silly duck." His face lit up as if he was frightened. At this point, I knew he wasn't kidding around. He says that we need to get to our parents. So we find my friend's parents, and my friend tells his parents of the secret room. They ask me where it is, so I go and show them it. They told me that this was never part of the house when they brought it. So they call the police. I then go home. I'm getting ready for bed, and right before bed, my friend calls me. He says that the police found out that there was someone living down there this whole time. I asked him, who? He said they're not sure. The man was never caught, but someone was definitely living down there. I think to myself, maybe it's some homeless old man. But then my friend tells me that the person down there had knives and a picture of me and my friend from years ago. It's like he was going to try to kill us, and which means he's been living down there spying on us for the last couple of years. My face lit up in fright and wonder what would have happened to me if he was down there when I went down there while we were playing hide and seek. I never wanted to join the Marines, but I got talked into it and it just happened. I was coming home from boot camp. I had a bad experience with the military. I was about to graduate boot camp, then on the last obstacle course, I unfortunately got injured. They kept me in this hospital for months so I can heal, but I never healed, so they were forced to send me home. I've been through hell and now I can't even graduate. This sucks, I said. I wonder what my parents would think. On my way home, I really felt as if I let them down. But more, I let myself down, and I was embarrassed for not passing. I finally got home, and everything was different. My parents gave me a look of dissatisfaction. My sister was telling me how hard it was for everyone since I was gone. She told me that during dinner, my parents kept saying, "I hope our son is doing okay." My sister told me how depressed they and she became because of not having me in their lives. She told me that they would cry at night because she had no one to talk to, and that she would go into my room to talk to me, but then realize I wasn't there, and she would lay on my bed and start crying. She told me that they never ate dinners as a family, and most of the time they weren't home. They would work extra hours. She told me that I was the light in our family and I was what brought everyone together. They made me feel happy after everything I was going through. What I learned is that the Marines isn't for everyone. You can take this as anything else. Just because you try something, that doesn't mean you are going to succeed. But it's the effort that counts, and now you can know your limits and goals in life. It's been a couple of years. I found a pretty good job. I've always had thought of joining the military again, probably a more easier branch, but it just never happened. Between work and school, I've been extremely busy and thought maybe the military just wasn't for me. One day, I was going through my old stuff and I found my letters of when I was in boot camp. I read the letters and started crying. I felt like I let everyone down, including myself, because the letters said that my parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, and uncles all believed in me, and I failed them all. I then hear someone knock on the door. I go to the door to open it, and it's my drill instructor. He looks at me and smiles. He says, "We have unfinished business left." I look at him in confusion and think, and I remember, I never got injured. I found out the military secret and what they were going to do to me. They never liked me, so they were going to try to kill me. I never got injured by accident. I got pushed from behind and was expected to be killed. But I unbelievably survived, and I was going to tell everyone but they brainwashed me into thinking that I got injured, and then they sent me home. I looked at the date and saw that it's been exactly 3 years. Then I realized that the brainwashing wore off every 3 years, and that they were here to brainwash me again so I wouldn't remember. The drone instructor then takes me before I can get away, and I wake up on my bed. It's 9 a.m. I'm eating breakfast with my parents, and I tell them I had the most strangest dream, and I feel like there's something I need to tell everyone. They ask, "What was it?" I answered, "I'm not sure. I forgot. I just remember that it was really weird and it was about the military." "Oh well," I said. "It can't be that important." We all laughed and continued eating our food.